President Rodrigo Duterte has been in office for less than 100 days, but the Philippines and its international reputation have changed. Duterte has thrown out the diplomatic playbook, winning fans and critics.
I do not have any master except the Filipino people. Nobody but nobody. You must be respectful. Do not just throw away questions and statements. Putang ina, mamurahin kita dyan sa forum na.
This comment ahead of his first visit to a major international forum was widely interpreted as a slight at US President Barack Obama. Duterte's staff and later he himself said it was a misinterpretation. He's becoming notorious for his colourful phrases. He's threatened to leave the UN, but the next day said it was just a joke. Labelled UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon a fool, and this is what he told the European Union this week. The president pulls no punches in condemning critics for his war on drugs, but the ultimate price is being paid by ordinary Filipinos. Duterte swept to power on a promise to rid drugs from Filipino society by any means necessary. And since his term began, the death toll of suspected criminals, drug users and pushers has been sobering. 3,313 people have been killed. 1,185 died in police operations. 2,128 died in vigilante-style killings. The crackdown is far from over. The president says he needs another 6 months to deal with the problem.
We are trying our very best to put order in this country. We are racked with so many problems: kidnapping in the south, terrorism, drugs, which is really pulling us down.
Inside the country, people have been protesting against the extrajudicial killings. A Senate inquiry into the deaths has been mired in controversy. But in a country which has been affected by a drugs crisis for decades, there is support for the Duterte doctrine. A July poll showed 91% of Filipinos trust him. And for the president, their opinion is what matters.
Then they will be killed until the last pusher is out of the streets. Until the drug manufacturer is killed, we will continue, and I will continue, and I don't give a shit about anybody observing my behavior.
A solemn promise from a man whose nickname is the Punisher. Natalie Pohanen, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now from Manila is Pompey Lavinia, who is the social media director of President Duterte's election campaign. Thanks so much for joining us, Mr. Lavinia. Around 15 million Filipinos voted for President Duterte. This confrontational style, tough on crime, to the point of encouraging vigilante justice, speaking your mind, not being diplomatic in your language, is this what Filipinos want?
First of all, I will not accept that the president is officially endorsing vigilante killings. But what he is advocating for is putting the full force of the law against drugs. And if that leads to violence, if people resist arrest, for example, then so be it.
Hundreds of people marched earlier today on the 44th anniversary of martial law, which was declared by Marcos. And not thousands, just hundreds. It was small. But some of the banners were interesting. I was looking at pictures from those banners. Stop the killings, address poverty, the root cause of criminality, strengthen the justice system. Will President Duterte listen to these people? Is he likely to listen to them?
Well, those are all the sights and sounds of a democracy like we have. That's the farthest thing we are from now is martial law. The fact that people can go in the media, demonstrate, go against the policy of the president as long as it's in words, that's fine. Now, the president does listen to the people. But in the end, he will decide based on what he feels is best for the country.
I've been reading the papers and the news in the past few hours, and we have statements coming out from the president regarding condemnation from the European Union. And let me just quote him directly here. I read the condemnation of the European Union against me. I will tell them, F you. And he then also raised his middle finger during the speech. And then he said, the European Union now has the gall to condemn me. I repeat it, F you. Does that become a problem when you're dealing with messaging for the president when he says stuff like that?
Not at all. The president is the president and he can speak his mind. And what he's doing is he's expressing his outrage that foreign countries would actually dictate to us what we can do. That would be like Filipinos, somebody like me, for example, telling your country how to deal with the recent events you've had there. That's on the world stage. Now, you haven't heard Filipinos tell you what to do, right? I mean, so there's a certain outrage that Europeans would tell us what to do because we're a sovereign country.
Sure, understood. You're a sovereign country and he has every right to be upset at them perhaps dictating policy or, issuing their condemnations. But can you genuinely, honestly tell me you're comfortable with your president telling the entire European Union, F you, and literally sticking the middle finger to them?
You're asking for my personal opinion. Personally, the style of the president is his style. I'm not going to tell him how to say what he wants to say. Now, I feel the same way. I am outraged by the way that these people in Europe who have their own problems to address about human rights, migrants, refugees, would, tell us here what to do. Now, if you notice, I'm using a different language, but that is me, and he is him. So I'm certainly not going to tell him how to say what he wants to say. Now, did the message get across to the European Union? I think it probably did. Are there other ways to say it? Yes.
Do you believe he made a mistake in the way he referred to President Barack Obama?
He was not. President Obama himself said that he did not take it as a personal insult. He himself, being a student of language, knew that this was just a manner of speaking for the president, that it's an expression. Like in the United States, for example, when they say, MF, right? The F word, they don't actually literally mean that, you're accusing the guy of incest, right? I mean, it's an expression, and it's exclamative to make a point. And again, you have to remember the context. The context there was a hypothetical situation where you have a reporter asking him, hypothetically, what would you do if the stronger country would tell you that you have to do this, you have to do that, this is how you ought to approach human rights. And hypothetically, right, he said that if he does that, I'm gonna say this.
Right. But I mean,
so I think President Obama himself said he did not take it personally.
Sure, he didn't take it personally, but I mean, when we look at the timeline, it appears as if he was offended enough to cancel his visit, right? So you have the timeline, and these words, son of a whore, I will curse you in that forum, in reference to President Obama. President Obama then cancels his visit. And later on, President Duterte says, while the immediate cause was my strong comments to a certain press question that elicited concern and distress, we also regret it came across as a personal attack on the US president. So with that in mind, I guess what I'm asking you as someone who's involved with messaging, is President Duterte maturing as he does the job? And is he maybe tweaking and altering his approach as he goes along? And is he going to have to learn to play the game?
See, you're asking me that question from the point of view of an international audience looking at how the president is communicating. But you have to remember that in a press conference like that, the president may be talking to a different audience, the audience of the Filipino people themselves. So will he change his style? I really don't know. Will it evolve and will he learn? I'm sure he will.
Do you hope that he doesn't use any more insults towards either the European Union or the US president?
I do not want to be presumptuous really and tell the president how to say what he wants to say. It would depend on the situation. It would depend on the situation. There are situations where, you know, you have to say what you have to say to make a point. But, you know, in general, it's not a good idea to be, you know, throwing insults at each other, and just as much as it's not a good idea, for example, for the European Union to tell us what to do.
Yeah, and again, you're a sovereign country, you're a democracy, the president was democratically elected, all granted, right? And you have to deal with your crime situation however you best deem fit. But just looking at the statistics again, since July the 1st, 3,313 people have been killed, and this is from the PNP, the Philippines National Police. 2,128 people were killed extrajudicially, and I guess that can be deemed vigilante justice. When we look at those numbers, they're massive numbers, and we can't be absolutely sure that everybody who's been killed was guilty of a crime. With those numbers in mind, can you at least understand that they might be concerned that the Philippines might be plunging into chaos if these numbers continue to balloon? Can you at least understand that from their perspective?
Yes, I can understand that. And even here, people are concerned. The president himself has ordered an investigation on what are these killings that are beyond the police actions. But what you have to remember is that there are 10 times more, maybe even more than 10 times, that surrendered peacefully or gave up without incident. So, you know, you have to remember that this is not an ordinary police operation, but it's a war on drugs. And in war, you know, there are casualties. But yes, I mean, you know, we're not callous that we are not affected at all by the killings. And, you know, people are concerned. Even the president himself, you know, has ordered an investigation into what's happening with those killings.
So far, is the war on drugs worth it?
Winning, I assume that you ask, it's being successful? Yeah, I think so, because the amount of supply has dropped dramatically. I think more than 500,000 people have surrendered, and you know, but is it over? It's not. There's a ways to go.
The numbers are 3,000 people killed. At what point would it become too much? 30,000, 50,000, 100,000? At what point might you go, maybe this is being a bit heavy-handed?
That is too hypothetical and so far out in the future for me to give you a number like that. I wouldn't know how to answer that question. It depends on the situation. You know, you have to remember that the president sees this as an existential threat. It's the threat to our survival as a country. Whether you agree with it or not, that's how he sees it. You know, because you have to remember that such a big percent, we don't want 1 out of 10 Filipinos walking around like zombies, high on drugs. And you have to remember also that most of the drug dealers here, most of the big drug suppliers are foreign nationals. So, you know, it's a national security threat as far as even the previous president had declared it to be. But the President Duterte is taking much firmer action. Now, as to the number of casualties, we don't know, because we don't know how this will play out. We don't know if people will just surrender, if people will, you know, it will be under control now. I mean, how long will it take to get it under control? I don't know. So I don't know if I can't tell you such a theoretical question without me knowing the other variables in the future.
Very finally, if you'll allow me to perhaps give you an analogy or similarity here. You have a charismatic man with millions of followers, speaks his mind, and in many ways often tears up the rule book of diplomacy. Might there be similarities with a certain Mr. Trump, and how does that make you feel?
You know, I'm not going to comment on American politics, just like we don't like it if foreigners comment on get involved with our politics. But from what I can observe, you know, very, very, very different men, very, very different situations. Maybe in the way they speak there might be similarities, but I really don't want to go beyond that because I would be, you know, expressing my views on opinions on issues that, for me, it's up to the voters of the United States to decide.
Okay, Pompey Lavinia, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks so much.